Europe's $105 billion move with Russian assets is shaking up the global financial scene. And honestly, not many get what's going on. On December 12, 2025, the European Union crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. They moved from freezing Russian assets to actively using them to fund the war against Russia. They thought it was a clever financial hack, a way to make Putin pay. But within 48 hours, Moscow responded, not with missiles, but with a decree that targeted the $200 billion in European corporate assets sitting inside Russia. Volkswagen, Raiffeisen Bank, Shell, BP, they are now hostages in a financial war that Europe has lost control of. Welcome to the Financial Coin Historian. Today, we are going to expose the strategic blunder of the century. We will break down the $230 billion lawsuit threatening to bankrupt Euroclear. We will analyze Decree 693, the weapon Putin is using to liquidate Western industry. And we will show you why the Global South is looking at this spectacle and deciding, once and for all, to leave the Western financial system. The headlines say Europe stood firm. The reality is, Europe sacrificed the credibility of its entire financial system for a tactical win that might cost them everything. To understand the magnitude of this crisis, we have to go back to the beginning. On February 26, 2022, the European Union froze approximately $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. It was unprecedented. Never before had Western nations seized the sovereign assets of a major nuclear power. For 2 years, those assets sat frozen. Europe debated. Lawyers warned that confiscating them would violate international law. Central bankers warned it would destroy trust in the euro. But by late 2025, desperation set in. Ukraine was facing a $137 billion funding gap. The United States, under a new and transactional Trump administration, was pulling back aid. Europe needed money, and they needed it fast. The Reparations Loan. On December 3, 2025, the European Commission unveiled the Reparations Loan. The plan was to issue a $105 billion loan to Ukraine, backed not by European taxpayers, but by the future interest earnings of the frozen Russian assets. They used a complex legal argument called substitution of assets. They argued that since the Russian bonds had matured into cash, the nature of the asset had changed. It was a loophole, a legal trick. But to Russia, it wasn't a trick. It was theft. Moscow had warned for months, if you touch our reserves, we will touch your companies. Europe didn't listen. They invoked Article 122, an emergency clause to bypass the need for unanimous voting, and pushed the measure through. They thought they had outsmarted the Kremlin. They were wrong. The epicenter of this earthquake is not in Berlin or Paris. It is in Brussels, in the offices of a company you've probably never heard of, Euroclear. Euroclear is the plumbing of the global financial system. It holds the vast majority of the frozen Russian assets, about $190 billion. When the EU decided to seize the profits from these assets, they put a target on Euroclear's back. The $230 billion lawsuit. On the very day the EU announced the indefinite freeze, the Bank of Russia filed a lawsuit in the Moscow Arbitration Court. They aren't suing for the $105 billion the EU took. They are suing for 18.2 trillion rubles, approximately $230 billion. This claim includes the principal, the interest, and punitive damages for the freezing of assets. Why does this matter? Because Euroclear holds assets all over the world. Russia is now seeking to enforce this judgment in friendly jurisdictions: China, Hong Kong, the UAE, Kazakhstan. If a court in Hong Kong honors the Russian judgment and seizes Euroclear's assets there, the entire global clearing system could fracture. The Belgian government is terrified. Prime Minister Bart De Wever refused to support the plan without a guarantee that other EU nations would share the cost of the lawsuits. He knows that if Euroclear goes bankrupt, the Belgian economy goes with it. The EU has turned its own financial infrastructure into a hostage. While lawyers fight over Euroclear, Russia launched a direct assault on the ground. In October 2025, President Putin signed Decree number 693. The media called it a privatization measure. In reality, it is a weapon of mass financial destruction. Decree 693 allows the Russian state to take the assets of unfriendly foreign companies and sell them at a massive discount to Russian loyalists. It bypasses all normal laws. It requires no negotiation. The corporate hostages. The decree specifically targets companies from nations that pushed for the asset seizure. Volkswagen. With $3.5 billion in assets in Russia, they are now vulnerable to immediate nationalization. Raiffeisen Bank. The Austrian bank has tried to leave Russia for years, but it's trapped. Now, its Russian subsidiary, worth billions, is at risk of being seized and handed over to a state-owned bank. Danone, Shell, BP, all are on the list. The total European corporate exposure in Russia exceeds $200 billion. Russia is not seizing it all at once. They are being surgical They are seizing the exact amount that Europe takes from them. It is a perfect mathematical mirror retaliation. This has created panic in European boardrooms. CEOs are screaming at their governments. You took Russian state money to look tough, and now we are paying the bill. Russia has successfully turned the European private sector against the European political elite. The damage goes far beyond the balance sheets of a few companies. The real casualty of this war is trust. For 75 years, the Western financial system operated on a single sacred principle: property rights. If you deposit money in a Western bank, it is yours. Even if we hate your government, your money is safe. That rule made London, New York, and Frankfurt the financial capitals of the world. That rule is dead. By seizing sovereign assets, Europe has told the world, your money is safe until we decide it isn't. The global South exits. I have spoken with central bank governors from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Every single one is asking the same question. If they did it to Russia, could they do it to us? The answer is obviously yes. This is why we are seeing a quiet but massive diversification. Saudi Arabia is negotiating oil sales in yuan. India is settling trade in rupees. The UAE is building gold-backed settlement systems. Brazil is trading with China in national currencies. They are not doing this because they love Russia. They are doing it because they fear the West. They are de-risking their reserves. The $105 billion seizure didn't just fund Ukraine. It funded the marketing campaign for the BRICS currency system. It proved to the world that the dollar and the euro are political weapons, not neutral stores of value. And here is the cruelest irony of all. While Europe seizes Russian assets with one hand, it is handing Russia billions of dollars with the other. The LNG backdoor official sanctions banned Russian pipeline gas. But they left a backdoor open: liquefied natural gas, LNG. Data from late 2020 shows that Russian LNG imports into Europe actually rose by 7%, hitting record highs. Who was buying it? France, Belgium, and Spain. Terminals like Zeebrugge in Belgium are handling massive volumes of Russian fuel, the shadow fleet. Furthermore, Russia, General Shadow Fleet, over 300 aging tankers operating outside Western insurance, has generated over $22 billion in revenue above the price cap. Between 2022 and 2025, EU countries paid Russia approximately $216 billion for fossil fuels. Think about the math. The EU is seizing $3 billion a year in interest to hurt Russia, while paying Russia tens of billions a year for gas. The sanctions are a sieve. The asset seizure is theater. The only thing real is the destruction of Europe's financial credibility. History will likely look back at the 2025 asset seizure as the moment the West overplayed its hand. Europe sacrificed the legal integrity of the euro, the safety of its own corporations, and the trust of the global South, all for a loan that barely covers 6 months of Ukraine's budget deficit. It is a strategic blunder of historic proportions. Russia's response has shown that financial warfare cuts both ways. The monster the official spoke about in Brussels is now loose. Euroclear is facing insolvency risks. European companies are being nationalized. Global capital is fleeing to neutral jurisdictions like Singapore and Dubai. The EU thought they were firing a financial nuke at Moscow. In reality, they detonated it inside their own banking system. This is the financial coin historian. The rules of money have changed. Property rights are conditional. And in this new world, no asset is safe.